Ever catch yourself scrolling through those, like, top 10 books you got to read before you die lists? You know, the ones it's like, who made these people the ultimate arbiters of taste?
Right. Like my reading list isn't already long enough.
Seriously. But someone out there took this whole ranking thing to a whole other level, and well, we're diving into that today.
Oh, this is going to be good. What'd they rank this time? Best pizza toppings.
Close. Get this, someone tried to rank sacred texts.
Okay, now that's a deep dive. Talk about subjective. What even counts as a sacred text? Depends who you ask. Okay.
Exactly. We're talking about texts that have shaped civilizations, sparked revolutions, heavy stuff. But someone thought, hey, let's rank them. And you know what? As much as I want to judge,
Yeah.
it's just too fascinating to resist.
All right, I'm hooked. Where does one even begin with ranking something as sacred?
Well, our intrepid list maker kicks things off with what they call C tier, the wisdom of this world.
Yes.
So more about navigating this life than like ascending to a higher plane.
Grounded, practical stuff.
Yes.
Interesting.
First up, we've got the Analects by Confucius. I gotta admit, I was expecting something a bit more, mystical.
Yeah, Confucius' ancient wisdom. You'd think.
But it's surprisingly practical. It's all about building relationships, being a good leader, honoring your family, like ancient Chinese self-help.
Huh. Before self-help was a thing.
Exactly. Then there's the art of war. Everyone thinks Sun Tzu, bam, military genius, which he was.
Brutal, but effective, from what I remember.
Exactly. But here's the thing. So many of his strategies, totally relevant to, like, modern business.
No, wait, really? Like what?
Well, he's big on knowing your enemy, right? Which, in business, that's market research. Understanding your competition.
Huh. Makes sense. Don't go into battle or business blindly.
Exactly. It's about strategy. Next up in the C-tier roster, the Tao Te Ching, the heart of Taoism. Honestly. Kind of surprised this one isn't ranked higher.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, it's all about simplicity, going with the flow, finding balance. Seems pretty relevant today, don't you think?
Yeah, in our crazy, fast-paced world, that does sound like a recipe for, well, not completely losing it.
Right. And rounding out the C-tier, we've got Hammurabi's Code, basically, ancient Babylonian law. And let me tell you, some of these laws, harsh.
Eye for an eye and all that, right?
Pretty much. But it's a good reminder that even way back then, people were trying to create order, a functioning society, even if their methods were a tad different.
Absolutely. So we've got practical advice, military strategy, ancient wisdom, and a legal thriller. Quite the mix for the wisdom of this world.
Right. And you know what I find interesting? This whole idea of separating wisdom from, say, spirituality. For many cultures, that line wasn't so clear-cut.
That's a good point. Like living in harmony with the world, mastering skills, that was spiritual.
Exactly. It wasn't always about otherworldly beings or mystical experiences. Sometimes the most profound truths were right there in everyday life.
So true. So where do we go from here? Does it get more mystical as we move up the ranks?
You know it. Our list maker calls it B tier, where the spiritual starts to peek through. Still grounded, but definitely a shift towards the, shall we say, less earthly realm.
Okay, things are about to get interesting.
Oh yeah, and we're talking some heavy hitters here. The Torah, the Vedas, the Quran, the Dhammapada. These are central to major world religions, and each one blends spiritual teachings with, like, guidelines for how to live your life.
It's that balance that makes them so fascinating. They're not just about abstract ideas. They're about how we should act, how society should function.
Totally. Like the Torah, for example.
Yeah.
It's got stories, laws, history, incredibly influential. But it's also very grounded in the lived experience of the people who wrote it, who lived by it. It's about the relationship with God, but also about, like, how to build a just society, how to resolve disputes, even how to cook.
Wow, the original life hack guide.
Right. Then you've got something like the Dhammapada, which is all about Buddhist teachings on suffering, enlightenment, finding liberation, deep stuff. But it always comes back to personal experience, understanding yourself and the world. It's less about dogma and more about cultivating wisdom from within.
And that's what's so important to remember, right? This B tier. We're talking about incredibly diverse cultures, beliefs, histories, yet they all share this common thread, bridging the spiritual and the practical. It really broadens our definition of sacred, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like we're looking at a global tapestry,
Yeah.
Woven from all these different threads of belief and practice.
Exactly. And as we move up to the higher tiers, those threads, those questions become even more intricate, even more awe-inspiring.
Okay, so we're talking A tier, where reality gets a little fuzzy. If B tier had one foot in the metaphysical, A tier's like, hold my drink, I'm diving in.
Yeah.
What's waiting for us in this realm where history meets the supernatural?
Get ready for texts that blur the lines, part historical account, part philosophical inquiry, part divine revelation. They're stories, but they're also something more.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. We're talking texts that spark debates, interpretations, maybe even a few holy wars.
Oh, absolutely. And first up in A tier, we have the New Testament. Love it or hate it, no denying its impact, right? It's got ethical teachings, stories of miracles, profound claims about divinity.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. And what's fascinating is how it ends up on this list alongside texts like the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. Completely different traditions, but all wrestling with these big questions. Who are we? What's our purpose? What's the nature of reality itself?
You know, the Bhagavad Gita always gets to me. Part of this epic poem, right? But it focuses on this one conversation.
Yeah.
Prince Arjuna,
Yeah.
right on the battlefield, talking to the god Krishna.
Talk about high stakes. And it's
Yeah.
brilliant, right? Because there they are facing war and they're delving into duty, destiny, the nature of reality makes these huge ideas so immediate, so human.
Totally. And then there are the Upanishads. Okay, full disclosure, it took me a while to wrap my head around these, but the basic idea, if I'm getting it right, is that we're all part of this interconnected web, and the goal is to realize our oneness with, like, the ultimate reality.
Right, Brahman, that underlying unity.
Exactly. Like every drop of water is still part of the ocean. Okay, but we can't forget the Book of Enoch. Angels, fallen angels, visions of heaven and hell talk about a wild ride.
It really captures that fascination with the celestial, the otherworldly. And even if it's not part of the official canon for some, its influence on how we imagine the afterlife. Huge.
No doubt. Okay, so A tier is where things get fuzzy. I might need a stronger beverage before we hit S tier. I have a feeling it only gets more, shall we say, mind-bending from here.
Oh, you have no idea. S tier. This is where logic might need a stiff drink. We're entering the realm of the truly mystical, rooted in specific interpretations of reality. Even summarizing them is a challenge.
Challenge accepted. Hit me with your best shot. What's the most mind-bending text in this S tier?
For sheer density and complexity, hard to beat the Zohar.
Ugh, the Zohar. Even the word sounds mysterious. It's Jewish mysticism, right?
Essentially, yes, but mysticism feels almost reductive. It's a way of interpreting the Torah and reality itself through this intricate system of symbols, metaphors, hidden connections.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm getting a little lost here. Any chance of a relatable analogy?
Imagine trying to understand a movie by looking only at individual frames, except each frame is a jigsaw puzzle scattered across multiple dimensions. That's kind of what studying the Zohar is like.
Wow. I might need to meditate on that one. Okay, so if the Zohar is a cosmic jigsaw puzzle, what else is waiting in this S tier?
Well, we've got the Egyptian Book of the Dead. As the name suggests, it's ancient Egypt's guide to navigating the afterlife.
So, like, spells, rituals, what to expect when you cross over.
Exactly. And sure, we might not use it as a literal guidebook today, but it gives us this incredible window into their beliefs, their anxieties. Imagine being so concerned about the afterlife that you create these elaborate maps and instructions.
Wow. From cosmic puzzle to afterlife roadmap. Quite the range. What else have we got?
Our S-tier journey continues with Quranic Sufi texts, Sufism being a mystical branch of Islam. These texts, they dive deep into achieving unity with the divine, transcending the ego.
We're talking like experiencing the divine through poetry, music, dance.
Exactly. And that idea of unity with the divine, of losing yourself to experience something greater, it pops up across traditions. We see hints of it in the Upanishads and mystical traditions throughout history. Makes you wonder if it's something humans are hardwired to seek.
That yearning for something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
So we've explored texts that offer practical wisdom, spiritual guidance, and even a glimpse into realms where reality gets a little fuzzy. Where do we go from here? What happens when we venture beyond the familiar, beyond the boundaries of logic and conventional understanding?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And according to this ranking, we're about to find out. We're entering the realm where even the most open-minded among us might raise an eyebrow.
Okay, now you've piqued my curiosity. We're talking about texts so strange, so open to interpretation, that they might as well have been written in a language only decipherable by dolphins. Bring on the weirdness.
Get ready, because we're diving headfirst into S tier, where logic fears to tread, and we kind of love it.
Where logic fears to tread. That should be the tagline for our show. But seriously, what kind of textual oddities await us in this realm beyond the pale?
Leading the charge is none other than the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead. Okay, I've definitely heard of this one, but mostly from movies where people are trying to contact spirits or decipher ancient prophecies. Is it really a guidebook for the afterlife, or is Hollywood messing with us again?
It's less of a how-to manual for the dearly departed and more like a psychedelic travelogue through the bardo.
The Bardo. That sounds like something you'd order at a hipster coffee shop.
Right. But in Tibetan Buddhism, the bardo is this intermediate state between death and rebirth. Imagine a realm where you're met with deities, confronted by illusions, forced to confront the karmic baggage of your previous life. It's all about navigating this disorienting, dreamlike state to ultimately achieve liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth.
Talk about an intense spiritual detox. It's like a cosmic reset button, but you have to face your demons first.
Exactly. And whether you interpret it literally or metaphorically, the Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks to a universal human fascination with what happens after we die. Is there an afterlife? Do we get reincarnated? These are questions that have haunted us since the dawn of consciousness, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a glimpse into one culture's attempt to map that unknown territory.
It's kind of comforting in a strange way. Like, even thousands of years ago, people were just as curious and terrified about death as we are.
Absolutely. And speaking of ancient wisdom, trying to unravel life's big mysteries, we have the Emerald Tablet.
This is the one with the famous "as above, so below" line, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that quote everywhere on Instagram, tattooed on people's arms, even on those inspirational posters at the dentist's office.
It's a deceptively simple phrase that encapsulates a core principle of Hermeticism. This idea that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm, that there's a fundamental interconnectedness between all things. The patterns and principles that govern the universe are also reflected in our own lives, and vice versa. It's heady stuff.
No kidding. I'm starting to get why this whole S tier is where logic fears to tread.
Oh, and we've got one more stop on our tour of the esoterically fascinating, the Nag Hammadi scriptures.
These are the ones discovered buried in a jar in Egypt, right? I remember reading about it, a treasure trove of lost gospels and early Christian texts.
Precisely. And these weren't your typical Sunday school readings. The Nag Hammadi texts offer a glimpse into Gnosticism.
Gnosticism. That's ringing a bell, but I can't quite place it.
Think of it as a more mystical, esoteric approach to early Christianity. Gnostics believed in a direct personal experience of the divine. They had this whole elaborate cosmology with hidden realms, celestial beings, and a different take on Jesus than what became mainstream Christian doctrine.
So not exactly your average Christmas Eve service readings, then.
Definitely not. The Nag Hammadi texts offer a fascinating glimpse into the diversity of early Christian thought and challenge us to consider the road not taken, the paths not explored.
Okay, so we've got a roadmap to the afterlife, a cosmic mirror reflecting our interconnectedness, and a glimpse into the minds of early Christian mystics. Is it even possible to top this level of intriguing strangeness? Is there anything left in this ranking, or have we reached peak weirdness?
Believe it or not, our intrepid list maker has not exhausted their fascination with the utterly baffling. Beyond S tier lie two more categories: the broken tier and the beyond broken tier.
Wait, seriously? Broken Tier sounds like something out of a Lovecraftian horror story. It could possibly be so strange, so far beyond human comprehension, that it earns a place in this forbidden zone of sacred texts.
Picture this. Texts so enigmatic, so resistant to interpretation that they've driven scholars mad for centuries. Texts that seem to defy the very laws of logic and language.
You're not going to leave me hanging, are you? Give me some examples.
We've got the Book of Thoth, an ancient Egyptian text supposedly containing powerful magic spells and cosmic secrets that most scholars believe is entirely mythical. Then there's the Kabbalion, which delves into Hermetic philosophy, claiming to reveal universal laws that govern reality and empower individuals to shape their own destinies. And finally, we have the Sefer Yetzirah, a Kabbalistic text that suggests the universe was created through the power of Hebrew letters and numbers, each letter vibrating with a specific energy.
My brain is officially starting to melt. These aren't just texts, they're like portals to alternate dimensions.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, we arrive at the beyond broken tier.
Okay, you absolutely have to elaborate on this one. What could possibly reside in this textual abyss? What monster of incomprehensibility lurks in the beyond broken tier?
Brace yourself, because we're about to encounter the ultimate enigma, the Voynich Manuscript.
The Voynich Manuscript. This is the one written in an unknown script, with illustrations of bizarre plants and astronomical charts that nobody can decipher, right?
You got it. To this day, the Voynich Manuscript remains one of history's most baffling mysteries. Is it a coded message, an ancient herbal guide, a work of elaborate fiction, or perhaps a message from another dimension? Nobody knows.
Wow. It's oddly beautiful in a way that's testament to the limits of our understanding, this concrete reminder that there are still mysteries in the universe that we may never solve.
Precisely. And that's the beauty of this entire deep dive, isn't it? It's not just about ranking texts, but about exploring the vast spectrum of human thought, belief, and imagination. From the most practical advice to the truly baffling, these texts remind us that the search for meaning, for connection, for something beyond ourselves is a universal human endeavor.
Well said. I have to admit, my mind is thoroughly boggled, but also strangely inspired. This whole journey, from the mundane to the mind-blowing, has been quite an eye-opener.
It makes you wonder, what texts would you include on a list like this? What speaks to your soul? What expands your understanding of the universe and your place in it?
Those are questions worth pondering. And on that note, we'll leave you to your own explorations. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those questions coming.